So welcome everybody. Thank you for joining us. I have the pleasure of talking with Dr. Edie Goldberg today about performance.
It's nice to be here. Thank you for having me. My background, my academic background, I have a PhD in industrial organizational psychology. So it's really kind of the psychology of work behavior, right? And that is how I developed my first love for performance management. And I've really been able to engage in this practice in all different parts of my background. So first part of my career, I worked for a boutique management consulting firm that focused on assessment and development. Then in the middle part, I worked for Towers Perrin. I was our global thought leader in the human capital practice and also our Asia Pacific liaison. And then 20 years ago, I started my own practice where I got to help my clients in all aspects of talent management. So everything from bringing employees into the organization, managing performance, careers, succession planning, and mostly talent strategy. And in the last couple of years, I wrote a book around internal talent mobility called The Inside Gig. My history with in performance management and helping organizations to be effective and to increase the performance and productivity of their company has been a lifelong passion.
What's the state of performance management?
The state of performance management is that everybody hates it, from managers to employees, people trying to implement it. It's really the most despised process in corporate America, I think. And I think a big reason for that is how we've kind of focused it. And it hasn't evolved over time as our workplace has and how our workers have. So performance management was, first created around World War I and was really used to assess people to help make fairer decisions around promotions. It kind of sort of morphed and changed over time, and we built in goals into the system. And then in about the 1980s, we really started focusing on pay for performance. And everyone liked that because it kind of gave you a little hook into the performance management process. And unfortunately, that issue has really kind of taken hold, and I would say almost strangled our performance management processes today. So it's all focused on managing pay, and it's not focused on managing performance.
As we think about the new, what's starting to change? Are things starting to change? And then what are some of the things in your mind that no matter what changes, this will always remain the foundation or the backbone of a good performance management system or any performance management system?
I can tie those two together because they're not different necessarily from one another. A few years ago, I wrote an article around the need to leverage social technologies to improve performance management. And I believe that in our world where we're operating in a much more collaborative manner, mm-hmm. that performance management really has to be done with the collective in mind. It's no longer just my manager who sees me, who works with me on a regular basis. In fact, for many global companies, somebody's manager may not physically be co-located with them. So your peers or other teammates or other managers actually might have more day-to-day interaction with you than your immediate manager. So the idea of allowing input from other individuals to help you grow and develop yourself, I think is really important. So those, and this is what new technology brings to us, the ability to bring in all those different conversations in more of a fluid way throughout the year, as opposed to this is just, once a year that I'm having a conversation and it's all driven from my manager. So social technologies, and social input is one of the new things. And the other is, and this is both an innovation and what is so critical that always has to be true, is around goal setting. So if you ask me, the number one most important part of performance management is about goal setting, because the research is really crystal clear. When you set specific, challenging goals that people can personally commit to, and then you give them ongoing feedback on their progress against those goals, that sets up a condition of motivation that makes people persist longer, work harder, etc. And the research shows this really super clear. So goal setting is not something that's ever going to go away, nor should it, because it really, really works. But how we do goal setting is changing. So we're now starting to see, and I recently did some research where, a majority of people are still using the SMART goal format. About 25% of people in our survey are now using OKRs, objective and key results. And I think the reason that they've moved in that direction is because those goals tend to be more agile. They tend to be set for smaller timeframes. And here's what's important. Our world of work and our business priorities change all the time today. No longer can you set a goal and forget it for the rest of the year. Well, you're not going to forget. You shouldn't forget it, but no longer are you going to set it and expect that same goal to be as important at the end of the year. Priorities shift. New emergencies come within our organization, new competitors, new changes and demands, new demands from customers. So the ability to change my goals or to, pivot quarterly or more frequently than that is really important. And I think OKRs are designed to be set for shorter timeframes. And I think that's why we're starting to see an increase in that newer approach. But of course, it doesn't really matter what your goal setting approach is, as long as you are checking in and changing and updating goals as needed to make sure that people are focused on the most important priorities for the business.
Focus on the most important stuff. I think that's some of the power behind OKRs too, is really reducing the noise, right? And just saying, hey, this is what's important. I like how you said these systems have to be agile, so it requires those tools to have that agility as things change. It's a big shift in the mindset for some of these companies too. I mean, a lot of companies still stick with the MBO-based approaches that don't have these shorter intervals of time. So very well said. I think that's as we see it too, the goal setting, we always say that's the backbone, right? Because the science is there. You build around some good, you start there. Like they're always wondering where to start. And we're always kind of guiding them too on our side, with the tool saying, hey, goals, that's a great win, right? You're going to have some impact there if you do it, and you got to do it right, like you were saying. So that's really good. That's really good feedback for the audience, and really think about and kind of driving that point home. Definitely something.
I think the foundation of any performance management system has to be the company's goals and then the individual goals. But the company's goals are your true north.
Yeah.
And that's what we're all trying to achieve together. And then if there are company, behavioral expectations, whether they be your core values or core competencies that are really important to driving success in that company, those expectations and the goals, that is the very foundation that you have to put the entire process on.
What feedback or advice would you give to them to help better understand the landscape around performance management, to kind of develop that initial understanding, or just get them up to speed about where we're at today?
There are a couple things that are really important. So first off, your leadership team is the number one factor in whether or not you're going to be successful in whatever you try to do, right? So they have to fully buy in, and they don't have to just be a sponsor of it, right? They don't pay for it, but they actually have to live it. They have to role model the behaviors. They have to reinforce and recognize whatever you're trying to do within your program. And it's only when they're very living it in that way that you can be successful. That's number one. Number two, though, is manager skills. So the problem and the reason that we fall down in performance management is, by and large, managers don't have the skills to provide feedback and coaching to employees to help them be successful. But as I think about kind of where we're at in performance management, I think the pivot point of where we can take this from a process that is widely despised to something that is powerful and brings energy and enthusiasm to the organization is by flipping from focusing all on evaluation and using goals as simply a measurement stick to determine, how you're performing, but really using those goals as a motivating factor, but then helping employees through feedback, through coaching. And I actually want to say feed forward rather than
Mhm.
feedback, because
Mhm.
understanding what's happened in the past is really important, but I can't change what happened in the past. So giving me feedback on something that I did probably doesn't make me feel very good. And it might raise my awareness to it, but coaching me on how to use my knowledge from the past to be more successful in the future, that is very powerful. And that also is more supportive to the employee. And this is where I think, when we understand the goals that we're trying to achieve, and then we wrap that with supportive coaching, feedback, and development to help people to achieve their goals, that's how we lift the individual and the organization up in their performance. So I would say, for people who are new to this field, how do we flip the conversation from being just about evaluating people, performance appraisal, to truly performance management, where we're thinking about how do we enable and how do we, I like to use the idea of catching, putting people on fire. You're a rocket and we're just going to
Uh,
light your fuel. How do we enable you to be the best that you can possibly be? And how do we enable your team to achieve more than they ever thought was possible? And that's by flipping the process and really thinking about more about enablement than evaluation.
I like that piece. I mean, it gets you. There's a lot more energy, and there's a lot more. It's a lot more motivating too. Like I can do something, right? I can. It's not water under the bridge. It's not the past. It's that future. It's exciting. I mean, the way we think about it that way, we're really increasing the quality of the experience within the organization, and then in turn, it's going to take it home. It's quality of life too. So I think that's a really powerful statement around motivating people to something, to become something, to perform at a level maybe beyond there.
There's some research that shows that, when we focus our process strictly on evaluation, that's when people really don't like it. Um, but when the process is focused more on development and helping people to achieve their goals, that both employees and managers like the
Yeah,
process better.
like you said, the feed forward, the future focused exercises. I mean, what we can become is a very exciting idea, right? We know where we are, but what we can become is that's a it's a powerful discussion.
In any company that, when they're starting to think about performance management, the one question I think it's important for them to ask is, why are we doing this?
Mhm. Yeah,
What is the purpose behind performance management for the company? Is it really just to dole out pay? Because you can have a compensation strategy that doesn't strictly involve your performance management process. It's not as easy, but you can. There are ways that you can separate those two.
yep, yeah,
But why are you doing it? And I think if it's truly to improve individual and organizational performance, people might make different decisions about how they go about it than if the reason for performance management is to evaluate and pay for performance.
I think a lot of times with the purpose too, we it serves too many purposes, right? Like we have this one process. I think you said it really well before, you and your colleague, when you're talking about one, you're serving seven masters, right, with one process here. I mean, and that's a killer. And we start to pull it back. What's your purpose? And it says, well, it does a little bit of this and it does a little bit of that. And you can't, it's really tough to manage a good process. Yeah. It's like, well, we do a little bit of everything. And so it's probably not achieving any of those outcomes well, like you shared. Now, kind of stepping back in the business context. So we talked a lot about performance management, kind of setting the context, right? Hey, this is what's going on in the state of it. And thinking as, people coming into this field, How is this connecting back to the overall strategy? So what role do you see performance management playing in the overall business strategy as we look at the broader company?
I think it is the central way in which you execute against the business strategy, right? So we have to, everybody in the organization really should know what the primary goals are, or, kind of strategic drivers for the company in going forward. And I'm not a big fan of cascading goals today because it just takes too long. If your organization's large, if you have a small organization, that strategy still might work for you. But if you're a larger company, it just takes too long and it's slow. But communicating what the goals are at the highest level of the organization, and maybe kind of within your department or your function, and then aligning to those goals, the ability of performance management to provide focus and attention of what are my most critical
Mhm.
strategic priorities as an employee. That's really important. I mean, you want to get the whole ship moving in the right direction, right? You want everybody in the rowboat rowing in the right direction. And when everybody understands what those goals are, and then connects how their work can further those goals, not always easy as you get further and further down in the organization. But I think your manager can play a big role in helping you connect those dots. And that's really important to understand, so that if the company says all of a sudden, we're not going to be the lowest cost provider because we have this new technological innovation and now we're going to be doing X and our
Mhm.
strategy is different, kind of unlikely to make that big of a pivot. But when companies make pivots, it's important for everybody to then reassess what they're focused on and make sure that they're going the same direction. So I think performance management inherently is the way in which you do execute against your business strategy.
It sounded like what you said earlier too. It was the execution on the goals, but also those behaviors too. Like if your pivot is like a cultural pivot.
Thank you for bringing that up, because I did kind of slide over that.
Mhm.
If if the new business strategy is one of winning on customer service, let's say, or winning on innovation,
Mhm.
reinforcing those behaviors through your process is really important. People need to understand, what does that look like? How do I do that? How do I get coached on that? How do I get feedback on, whether or not I'm executing in the way that we need to execute as a company? So the behaviors are a really important piece of that.
We talk about the strategy and we talk about performance management. What are some of the techniques or approaches that we should be using to understand and better manage performance in your mind?
I think what a lot of people do is they look at, are the forms being filled out correctly? Are they being filled out on time? And compliance, just, that is not impact. And so it's nice to know that people
Mhm.
are doing it. That's really important. And I would say that's like kind of level one. But we need to have better criteria on how we are measuring our effectiveness in this area. One of the things that many of my clients have done is tying some of their employee opinion survey measures to the process. So, if we're trying to help people be more supported by their manager into achieving their objectives, or if we have hoping to have people have a clear understanding of how they fit into the organization and helping, to achieve its goals. Or, we want to become a learning organization and I feel like my company is supporting my development in the organization. Having measures like that, both pre and post, is and on then ongoing, is important to understand whether or not you're delivering the kind of process that is actually making a difference within the company. Obviously, the most important thing to measure is company performance. And the problem is there are so many different variables that are
Yeah,
influencing
also.
your company performance. I mean, industry trends are going to influence it more than your performance management system will. but you can, do your best to look at from, when we first implemented this system to a year later, are we doing better as an organization? Is our company performance improving? And to me, that obviously is the ultimate metric.
I like how you said level one is that compliance measure, because a lot of times we're looking at these data like I had 100% of my people complete their reviews, and that becomes a proxy for, like you said, the appraisal is not necessarily performance management. We're looking at that measurement, like, do they all get it done? Because there's that assumption, like, yeah, maybe there's feedback in there. They've gotten feedback essentially about their performance.
In a lot of companies, they say, did we achieve the distribution that we wanted? And I'm gonna throw up a yellow flag on that one, because managers will manage to your distribution. And the conversation that they end out having with their employee is, I would have given you a 5, but I only had so many 5s I could have given. Mm-hmm. You'll get it next time. Or, everybody has to have one area that I rate them really low. This is your area this year.
Yeah.
There is this gaming the system of meeting the distribution that has absolutely nothing to do with performance. And that's one of the things that we have to get over. So having a forced or a normed distribution ends up being a lot of conversations around performance that aren't really genuine and truly about an individual's performance.
It also assumes, right, there's a normal distribution of performance, which we know from a lot of research it's not the case. So, I mean, we're ultimately, taking a normal distribution and putting it on an actual distribution of performance. There's already a significant gap that has a lot of unintended consequences to those high performers a lot of times. So it's a very tough one.
Yeah. So the research that you're talking about is that the actual distribution really represents more of a power law distribution curve, where there are a few individuals in your company that make a disproportionate impact on the success of your organization. And everybody else is kind of average performers. So when you think we need a performance management system to manage the pay of everybody, not really. You need a performance management system that can identify who those super high performers are. And I guarantee you all your managers know who they are. They don't need a rating system to do that, but they do know who those people are. And those people should be disproportionately rewarded for the impact that they're having on the company. And everybody else is doing their job. And that's not to say they're not doing a great job. They're doing a great job. You have very high expectations. But performance, there's a very wide band of kind of good performance. And very few people who aren't cutting it, because they generally get fired before they get to that point.
As we kind of tie this up, if you just step back and just give some honest feedback to people about, the advice you give on how to be better at managing performance today and in the future, what would be your words of wisdom for them? Like, what would you share with everybody here?
My hope is that we focus on the good and the positive and not the negative and the punitive. That knowledge workers today, they don't need to be managed. They want to be inspired. They want to be enabled to achieve their very best. There's a deep sense of belonging, that people want to belong to a team, that people want to do their best. They're striving to learn, to grow, and to use the performance management system as an opportunity to help them achieve, because achievement is very important to us, and help them to learn and grow. And when we focus on those things, companies that focus their process on development, I'm not saying to the exclusion of performance by any means, because I think goal setting, again, critical. But when you focus on development that enables you to achieve those goals, you're just putting the company on a kind of an accelerated path to greater and greater performance. You are lifting everybody up. So my hope is that we flip the switch on performance management and we start looking at it as a tool to really help people be their best, as opposed to a tool to kind of drill people down and make them not feel very good about themselves, because we all think we're above average. So anytime anybody gets a score rating on anything that's below average, they, immediately feel bad. So it's just not really a winning solution.
Dr. Goldberg, very well said. I see that summary, right, of the performance management is kind of like our path to achievement, right? Through growth, right? I think that's great to enable. And I appreciate the time, you talking to the audience. We're very fortunate to be able to talk with you and look forward to future discussions. In the meantime, take care and thank you. And thanks everybody for listening.
Thank you, Ann.